Hi, I'm Mr. Simons, and in this video we're looking at the 2020 Business Studies New South Wales HSC exam, and we're going to focus on the multiple choice. Before I just start here, can you see how it says allow 35 minutes for this section? You shouldn't allow 35 minutes. That's far too long, considering these are worth 1 mark each. I would be looking at 20 minutes max for this section, no longer. Don't do this 35 business. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so first question here says, which row of the table shows benefits? So I would circle that just to get me thinking, okay, so I need to be talking about the positives of both, not just one, staff training and staff development. So I need to have something that ticks both boxes. So if I look at these types of questions, what I do is I draw a big line between the two categories and then I pick one here. So what I might say is okay, so I think I'll start with staff development here, but I'll make that a little bit smaller so it's easier to see. So I'll start with staff development. So which of the following things shows the benefit of staff development? Increased staff turnover? No. So I can cross off A. Staff development does not. It allows us to retain experienced staff? No and no. So what I'm seeing here is just from looking at that first section, I can eliminate A and I can eliminate C. So now I've already got a situation where I'm looking at a 50-50. So here with staff training, will it decrease workplace redundancies? It's a complicated idea, but it will definitely increase staff skills. So I think that our best answer is B. Increase staff skills, retain experienced staff. Okay, question 2. Betty believes she is eligible, so she meets the criteria to ask her employer for flexible working arrangements. Which of the following is a provision of the Fair Work Act that gives Betty the right to make this request? So it's sort of saying like which element of these allows for flexible work arrangements. So if I look here, it's sort of like, is it in the modern award? Well, it could be, but it could also be in other contracts, common law, enterprise agreement. I just think when you know the stuff about the national employment standards, you know that the right to ask for flexible working arrangements is part of these minimum employment standards, is part of these conditions. So here the answer would be D. Okay, so here we go. Question 3, a firm has been hiring its own staff. Okay, it's been hiring its own staff. So that to me suggests that recruitment has been done internally up to this point, right? So then it says, but due to growth, it no longer has time to satisfactorily manage this process. So it has been doing it internally. It hasn't got the time. So if I'm thinking about, okay, so I've got a lack of time, what would a firm do? That the key thing that I would think about before I've even looked at the categories of the question is I'm thinking, well, this is the kind of thing that we would outsource. So you can see here, there's outsourcing. That looks good. Just out of interest, if we look at this, if we're looking at this acquisition, that's not really about managing that process because we still need to acquire talent. Recruitment, selection, those are kind of the steps involved in hiring a worker. But that's not going to resolve this issue because there is no time for those things. And really that's the point of the question, is that we don't have time to acquire, recruit, and select. What we need to do is we need to get some help. And that's where the outsourcing comes into play. Okay, question 4. Australian businesses, so we know that we are focused on Australia, are required by law to offer a refund. So people actually getting their money back. So if the product or service does not match the description. That seems like a reason. Is no longer required by the customer. That feels like a change of mind. Is damaged by the customer after purchase. Well, that's not a reason to get your money back. Is available at a competitor's business for a cheaper price. Consumers are not entitled to a refund if they can find the product cheaper elsewhere, but they definitely are entitled to a refund if the product or service they buy does not match the description given. Question 5, a business collects its own primary data. And that's the key part here. Okay, so it's collecting primary data through market research prior to developing a new product. So when we're thinking about primary data here, that we're thinking that this is, so essentially what I'm trying to say is that when we're talking about primary data through market research, we're talking about original research. So this hasn't been created for another purpose. This is very much for this purpose. So which of the following could this business have used to provide primary data? Well, original primary data, yes, talk to a customer. That would be a really good way to do it. If I look at these ABS stuff, is that this is really secondary data because this is for another purpose. This was not created just so this business could understand the issue of launching a new product. This stuff was created to provide economic and other information to the whole of Australia. Published journal, this tends to be research that is focused on other things, other topics, and we kind of look at it and we take a few ideas here and there. So that would definitely not be primary data here. That B, C, and D, they would be secondary. Okay, so question 6, the main advantage of economies of scale. When I see economies of scale, what I'm thinking about is the business is able to achieve lower per unit costs. They've got more efficient, so they can reduce the cost per unit in production. So if I look at it here, the main advantage of economies of scale is a business can achieve economic objectives. I'm not sure about that because economic objectives tend to be for the government. The main advantage is that it can achieve industry benchmarks. Look, maybe, not necessarily. Lower per unit input cost, man, that looks good. Simplified supply chain management. I'm not sure we can say that. I think the best answer here is that when we get economies of scale, we are able to achieve lower per unit costs, including for inputs. So this would be C. Question 7. So what is the most likely reason for an Australian clothing business, so Australian clothing business choosing to manufacture locally? So this is an interesting question, and a couple of things to think about is that if an Australian business is going to manufacture locally, something that we are able to say is that it is most likely going to be more expensive to produce locally because, in part, that wages in Australia would be higher than in other countries. So that this company is choosing deliberately to produce somewhere that is more expensive. But the other thing that I can think about is that if we are producing locally, then the business can maintain more control over its product and production and potentially raise quality standards in terms of the goods that are produced. So if we scroll back out here, we move across a little bit and we're thinking about here is that, so it's not going to be cost leadership because, as we have said, it is actually going to be more expensive. And cost leadership here is all about reducing the cost base for production. To maintain quality control, yes, because here we are looking at the benefit being quality control. To focus on other key business functions, no, because if we are producing locally, we are going to function on this KBF of operations because we're going to be managing it. Well, could you say that you would outsource it locally? I mean, I guess it's potentially true, but I think that the best reason to manufacture locally would be the quality element rather than to try and focus on other things. Because I guess the implication of this question is that the business would manage manufacturing itself. Obviously, that is not true because we are producing locally, not overseas. So I think that the best answer here would be B. B. Okay, so let's go to question 8, Question 8, 2 boxes of oats are shown. So even before we get into the categories, we can see here that there is quite substantial branding. Start cutting hours. So we can just cross off the boom and the upswing. And that what happens here is that it's in the downswing that we start cutting hours. If it had said something like unemployment rises quite high or that the business continues to do this, then I would start to think about a recession. But for this would be the downswing stage. A company has reduced the price of their current razor as a new model will be released soon. So I might just put a little note here. Okay, so I'm saying decrease price of old model. I'm just trying to focus my attention here. Which stage of the product life cycle for the current razor is indicated by this decision? So if I'm thinking about it, if we've got a situation where we've got a new razor coming out, new razor is going to be introduced, and that the current razor is being discounted, to me, what this situation suggests is that the current razor is going to be phased out. They're going to get rid of it. So we're definitely not in intro or growth. I think this is where that we can get caught up and we might say, well, it's mature, and they're bringing in the new one on board. But I think that the implication of this question is that the current razor, so that the new model will replace the current razor. So in that way, the current razor is being phased out, which to me signals decline, right? This is the end of the road for the current razor. Okay, so question 11. So let's have a look at the situation here. So a manager is concerned about ongoing theft and the cost of storing raw materials. So for me, that this very much sounds like an inventory problem, so that people are stealing the goods being stored and also that there is a high cost for storing them. So what we need to do is we need to find which inventory management strategy would best address the manager's concerns, so that the strategy here is aiming to reduce the need to store stock. What a lot of sibilance there. So to reduce the need to store stock. And that in terms of this, that we are currently warehousing, that these strategies aren't really aimed at that, but that this would be the solution here. Because then we are ordering things as the orders come in, and that here that there is less need or even no need for extensive storage. So that there, just in time, would help us out. Okay, so here we are at question 12. So a New South Wales employer develops a return to work plan in consultation with an insurer and the injured employee. So that this return to work plan signifies a couple of things to me. So what it's saying to me, and that's supposed to be an E, would you believe? One, the employee has been injured. So what I'm sort of saying, has already been injured. So we're not trying to prevent the injury, it's already happened. So if I look at this, for example, that WH and S, that to me is about prevention. So it's actually too late for that. So it's not this. Human rights, I don't think that that's the best option here. Fair work in terms of employment conditions, not really. That the reason that I think B is the strongest is that it's a return to work. That we are managing the process after the injury happened, which is part of Workers' Compensation Act. After an employee has been injured, what is it that the business does to try and fix and improve the situation and to help the employee? Question 13, in order to achieve best practice, okay, so in order to achieve it, so the business is not doing it right now, in order to achieve best practice, a mobile phone company examines global trends before designing and producing their phones. So that the key part here is that this business is not buying inputs from overseas. What they are doing at the moment is they are examining trends. So they are scanning and learning. That to me seems the best thing here. They're not standardizing. I don't think that's the relevant thing here. Global sourcing. The reason I wouldn't say it's global sourcing is because they're not actually buying the inputs. They're just looking at them for now, not inventory management. They're really doing this scanning and learning process because of the examining part of things. Okay, question 14 can be a bit tricky with the limitations of financial reporting. So a hairdresser includes the proceeds of sale. So includes the increase in income from that sale in the business's income statement. What limitation of financial reporting is evident? So we're sort of looking at that when the business does this, what is the potential problem with doing that? So if we are thinking about this story, is that it's not really about timing, because we're not here, that there's no discussion about the need to match time periods. So I wouldn't say that that's relevant. Also, in terms of capitalizing expenses, not relevant here because we're not talking about an expense and where it's recorded, right? So that wouldn't be the most relevant here. In terms of valuing assets and the correct value for it, I don't know, I could put a question mark here, but I'm not really seeing that because I don't see the kind of process to value the asset. So if I am just doing a process of elimination, I can already get to C. But I think it would be better to have some reasoning and rationale to say that it is C. Okay, so why is this normalized earnings? Why would C be the most relevant here? When we talk about normalized earnings, we'll just put this over here. So that what we're saying is that this sale for the hairdresser, that let's say that this is a large-ish capital gain. So that for this time period, that this has boosted the business's income. So you might think as an investor, that this business is doing quite well. In this time period, it has boosted its income. The thing is that this is not wholly accurate because if this salon equipment has been sold, it's not like it can be sold again the next year, that it's actually gone completely. So that this sale here is actually one-off. It's not going to happen again. So that what we would want to do in terms of this and presenting an accurate picture is we would want to remove this one-off sale so that the investors or other people who are looking through the financial statements have a more accurate view of the true level of income for the business. So here, this would be normalized earnings. Okay, a sandwich shop bakes a variety of breads throughout the day. So here, looking at variety. Customers select their choice of bread and filling, and sandwiches are made to order. So even before I get to the categories, I can see an enormous amount of customization. Even before I considered the answers, there is variety, choice, made to order. That also I'm thinking, if there is a lot of customization, then that's expensive, right? That is not always efficient either. That when I get customization and the ability for choice, that I'm thinking about quality in terms of the business. So here, I'm not, in terms of what we're looking for, let's go a bit slower. Which pair of performance objectives would have influenced the development of this approach? No, not cost and efficiency, right? Because this is a high cost strategy. And a little bit inefficient, because you can't just make the same sandwich. It has to be individual. So here, because it's not efficient, cost and customization. No, we're not prioritizing cost. What we are prioritizing is quality and customization. That is the story here, because here, not cost, yes, yes, no, no. And what you could also do is you could sort of draw a line here. It would be a bit awkward, but you could treat these as these two categories. And so you could say, all right, well, the only one with the ticks in both would be D here. Okay, a bathroom, well, let's make this a little bit smaller here. Okay, so a bathroom products business cannot sustain the production of their current range, so that the business produces all four of these things, but we are being told that a consultant has advised the business to reduce the size of the product range. So by comparing actual and planned results, which product should be deleted? So what I'm trying to see is that there is a big discrepancy between actual and planned. And the worst one, I'm going to try and get rid of. So if we look at this first here, we can say for January to June for coconut hand wash, actual results, planned results, that these two things are equal. So that's pretty good over here. Here, can you see that actual results are actually greater than planned results there? So I would be saying coconut hand wash, we should keep producing that, particularly because of this. If I look here, is that actual results are less than planned results for lavender body wash. So that's a bad thing here. But over here, not but, and actual results here are less than planned results for this as well. So I would start to think, oh, maybe that's not going to be good. Here, can you see actual results are better than planned for blueberry? And here, planned results are, so actual results here are less than planned. So that one's not so great. So blueberry maybe, but it's only 1 from 2 as opposed to 2 from 2 here. Peppermint bath salts. Actual is better than planned. Great. Here, actual is worse than planned. There. So the one that has failed to meet its planned on both is lavender. So you really need to go bit by bit through those types of questions. That for lavender, just for completeness, that it never hit or exceeded its targets. All right. So a business has provided the following financial information. Okay, so here we are with the question, and we're focusing on 2020. The first time I did this, maybe the second time, I started with 2019. So it says what shows the gross profit and net profit ratio, and net profit ratio is given to us. So I'll just remind myself that gross profit equals sales minus COGS. And so here I can be like, well, that's 130K. So what I can do is I can cross off A and B, because gross profit here is 105 and that's not correct. So then I can say, Well, I need the net profit ratio. So the first thing would be, well, let's work out what net profit actually is. And so net profit equals gross profit minus expenses. So here this would then be 95K. So if I'm looking at the net profit ratio for this, okay, so then it's going to equal $95,000 divided by sales here, which is 275. So then I would just put that in the calculator and I would get 34.5%. And I would say that the answer here is C. And I'm also starting to get some of the values here that I can also be like, oh, well, I'll just quickly add that as 105K here, and then net profit in terms of 105 minus 35, that would be 70K. So let's just scroll out a little bit because we'll need to see both things here. And then it asks us, which of the following describes the change in both the gross profit ratio and the expense ratio between those 2 years? So I will just create a little table on the side here, and I'll be like, okay, so I've got 2019, and then I've got 2020, and I'll put a little thing here, and then down there, and then across here. And so I will say, okay, white on white doesn't work there. So I'll go gross profit ratio and the expense ratio there. So I know that the gross profit ratio, no, I don't know the gross profit ratio just yet. So for 2019, the gross profit ratio is going to be 105 divided by 250. Okay. So that there is going to give me 42%. So gross profit ratio 42%. And then in 2020, I can go across and I can be like, okay, gross profit was 130K divided by sales 275. And this I not already worked out, but this I can then work out to be 47%. Okay, so what I can see here is that the gross profit ratio has improved. So here I can be like, all right, well, C and D are out. That the gross profit ratio, putting that down there, so I'm starting here, has improved. Then I think about the expense ratio. So here I'm thinking, okay, so total expenses is 35 divided by sales is 250, and those are K as in 1,000. So that will equal 14%. So the expense ratio, 14% in 2019. And then in 2020, that is going to be 35K divided by 275. So that's going to be less. So here that is going to be 13%. So the expense ratio has fallen, which means it has improved. So that here, gross profit has gone up and the expense ratio has fallen. For every $1 of sales, it's now 13 cents in expenses, which is an improvement. So our answer there would be A. So got a table, we've got numbers, we've got all the things that we would come to expect from this type of question. So our first question here says, okay, so the liquidity position. So liquidity, so current ratio equals current assets over current liability, right? And you can see current ratio, the formula has been given there as well. So current assets, 1,700 over current liabilities, 1,100, which will give us 154%. So that for this current ratio, we can see, well, actually that it is less than the industry average, because the industry average here is 2 to 1, and we've got 1.54 to 1. So that here we've got, okay, so we're worse than the industry average. So it can be either these things. And that, in terms of our current ratio, in 2019, it was 125%. So we've actually improved it since then, but it is worse than the industry average. So our answer there would be C. So hopefully not too tricky on that front. Now, question 20. So typically the most difficult question. The gearing for this business in 2020 indicates. Okay, so gearing. So we're looking at debt to equity, total liabilities over total equity. So the thing is though, is that, so I could get total assets and total liabilities. So for example, with total liabilities, I'm able to say that would be 865, that would be here. So that would be 7600. But in terms of total equity, I don't really have that, right? All I've got is these things here. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of calculating. So let's just zoom in a little bit and move it over here. So a couple of things that I can say. So I know that assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity. So that old equation. So what I know is that assets will equal these two things here. So that 10,330 will equal liabilities, which is in the green here. So 7600, and I'll just use a different color pen for completeness, plus owner's equity. So I'm really trying to get that because owner's equity here is total equity. So then all I need to do is rearrange things here. So I can then say owner's equity will equal $2,750. So then I can zoom out a little bit more, maybe not that much, zoom back in over here and be like, okay, well, all I need to do is to take this number here and bring it over here where it belongs. So I can say this is now 2,750, which will then give me 276%. So I'm saying here that for every, let's put it down there, for every $1 of equity, for every $1 in equity, the business has $2.76 in debt. So if I go back over here and I think about a couple of things, so let's zoom back out a little bit. So I know that for 2019, the debt to equity ratio was 2 to 1 or 200%. So I can see now that the debt to equity ratio is 276%. So if I bring this line down here, because I've got those two categories, so I can see one, that it has worsened since 2019. In 2019, this was 200%. In 2020, it's 276%. So it has worsened. So my options are B and D. Then I go to the industry average. I'll put this in white here. So then I can say, okay, so what was the industry average? So you can see that it's the same for both years, and the industry average was 100%. So not only is it worse, it is worse than the industry average. Worse than the industry average being 100%, and worse than 2019, which was 200%. So the answer there would be D. Okay, so that's the story in terms of these multiple choice. Hopefully you did well, or more importantly, saw where you made some errors and can see where you need to improve. There's a lot of annotations that I've included. I suggest you do that because you will get faster as you go and you'll start to see what you need to look for. Okay, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.